Hi! Welcome to my Zenith tutorial video, and here I'll be showing how I created my mochi donut sequence in Maya. I created a model of a mochi donut from spheres, while using an imported image for reference and using the top perspective in Autodesk Maya to guide the shape of the model. Here is my model in 3D space. Then, I imported my model as a tool into ZBrush, which lets you put the finer details onto models, and I used this picture as a guide for what I wanted the texture to look like. I used DragJect and Alpha Brush using downloaded photos of a bread texture, and I was able to paint this onto my model. Now I've imported my model back into Maya, and I've assigned, using the hypershade, to it a texture that looks like bread, so it looks more realistic. And now let's start making the liquid. So I've modeled a sphere, which I've chosen to be my emitter object for the liquid. And what that means is that when you go to Effects and Bifrost Fluids and create a liquid with the sphere selected, the liquid that results is going to match the shape of the sphere. Right now we see nothing, but I'm going to change out some properties so that we actually see liquid. With Bifrost Liquid selected, I'm going into my attributes and I'm changing the point size to be larger so we can see what's happening. Now we can see particles, and one cool thing to note is that while they're touching the emitter sphere, they appear blue, and when they fall away, they appear white. For my glaze on these donuts, I don't just want a single drop. I want a continuous flow. So with my sphere selected, I'm going into the attributes of the emitter prop, and I check continuous emission. So now it's a continuous flow. But it's still going through the donut. So with my model selected, I'm trying to create colliders, but it doesn't work with a group. If you have multiple components of your model, you have to select each individual component and then the Bifrost liquid container, and then go to Bifrost Fluids and create a collider. Okay, so now when we play it, the liquid actually interacts with the model, so I am happy with that. I'm going to change up some properties of the Bifrost liquid so that it emits more liquid and it's more viscous. In the container properties, I decreased master voxel size from 0.5 to 0.2 so that it can emit more liquid. And under viscosity, I kind of made a dramatic change. I went from 0 to 100, so that's going to look pretty different. And now when I play it, it emits way more liquid, and it's like pooling around the donut segment nicely. So at this point, we have a good foundation to change up the behavior of the liquid a little more. With the container still selected, I go to Bifrost Fluids and I can create a motion field. And a motion field allows me to play around with properties that are related to real-world physics, like turbulence and drag. And this part took a bit of trial and error because I can click something and it goes into a very different direction. So I kind of just played around with values until I was able to create something I'm happy with. Yeah, okay, it seems I have lost gravity, so let's go back. I'm making the magnitude much smaller and I unchecked direction. And now it looks a little too normal and non-turbulent. So I'm increasing the magnitude. I like this result because it kind of suggests like the liquid is being windblown, but it's still landing on the donuts really nicely. My purpose now is to get my emitter prop to move around on top of the mochi donut in a circle so that I can spread the glaze all around it. I'm going into the front view because my plan is to set keyframes for the position of the emitter prop, and the front view, it makes it much easier to do that because you're just moving the prop in basically 2 directions. Press S to set a keyframe and go forward a couple of frames in between each position. And finally, for the last frame, I'm copying the position I had in the first frame so that it can match better, and simply pasting it. So now it moves around in a circle. I shortened the time slider number of frames a little bit. Let's play it. I think it's moving around pretty nicely. It's kind of funny how the liquid just trails behind the sphere. I think I need a couple more frames, so I'm adding more values in a time slider. And I realize that I want the sphere to stay in place for a few seconds before it starts moving, so I'm copying and pasting the first frame, and then I'm moving the third frame now slightly back so it's more like evenly in between the frames in front and after it. Okay, even more frames. Before, I had too few frames for the movement of the glaze to completely make a circle, so I'm just adding more frames. So I'm really curious what this looks like in render view, and I'm going to go to Arnold and just quickly see what the live view looks like. It looks like we're pouring water onto our donuts because the default texture for the liquid is water, but it looks really cool. Now I want to figure out how to retexture my liquid so that it's not just water, but a milky glaze. As I was teaching myself how to use Bifrost liquids, I found I can color liquids in 2 ways. I can either select the Bifrost liquid layer in the left side panel and then assign a texture, or I can create this mesh by going to the liquid shape properties, selecting Bifrost meshing and enabling it, and then selecting the mesh and assigning a material to it instead. So now we have a mesh on our particles, which is like the translucent white part. And I'm going to select it, go to Hypershade, and create a new blend shader so that I can make a milky texture. I'm setting the color to white, and I'm going to turn down the spectral color so it's not super shiny. I titled it Milk Glaze. With the mesh selected, right-click and hold on the new Milk Glaze blend and choose Assign Material to Selection. It disappears, but just go back to the beginning of the playback and the liquid flow will restart. I want to see what it looks like in render view. So go to Arnold render view and we see what it looks like. It looks pretty nice. I would say it looks like real milky texture. It's pretty shiny, so I'm going to edit some properties in Hypershade. I'm selecting the blend and turning down the reflectivity even more. So now it appears more solid in the render view, which is live, by the way. So now I want to focus on this little component, a very small detail. The gray of the sphere here, when we click on render view, you can still see it pretty clearly. So I'm going into blend and I'm going to create a texture for just like transparent glass without any reflectivity so that I can assign it to the sphere and have it disappear. As I have set keyframes on the sphere, it doesn't work to Control H to hide it because it doesn't remain that way. But now that we've assigned it a glass texture, it will stay hidden. Let's make the scene more realistic, because who eats mochi donuts floating in thin air? Not me. So I've created a model of a plate separately, and I just copied over the OBJ file for it into this Maya Bifrost file. I've also created color and texture maps for the plate model using Adobe Substance Painter, and here, using Hypershade, I'm creating render nodes where I can attach those files to the model. I modeled the plate to look like a plate from a birthday party, and I turned down spectral color and reflectivity so it appears more realistic. I assigned this texture to the plate model by selecting it and right-clicking and holding on the blend with the texture and choosing Assign Material to Selection. And now it looks like the plate is textured. But the glaze is still falling through the plate, so I fixed that by creating a collider prop of the plate. When I play it, my playback shows the glaze pooling nicely on both the donuts and the plate. I wanted to make my scene look like the donuts are being served on a bed of grass at a birthday party. With my Skydome light selected, I went to the Attributes editor, went into the color properties, selected File, and created a render node where I attached an HDRI image of a grassy forest to the color property. An HDRI image stands for High Dynamic Range Image. So now we have a background, and even if the objects are floating in space, we can make it look like they're touching the grass by zooming in and rendering it that way. In my Arnold Render Live view, the donuts and the milk and the plate look really shiny, so I'm going into Hypershade where I can turn down the reflectivity and make it appear more realistic. I'm decreasing the specular color on a donut, as well as its specular roll-off, and its reflectivity. Then I did the same thing for the birthday plate model by turning down its reflectivity. And now it looks way more real. To create an actual rendered animation from this, I rendered out the whole sequence from the number of frames I had in my time slider, which was about like 240, and then I uploaded the footage into After Effects. That's all. I hope this video was helpful, and thank you so much for watching my Zenith project.